Joining me now with more on the situation in Crimea and what it could mean for the rest of Ukraine is Job Henning. He's a senior fellow at the Truman Project. Joining us from Austin, Texas is Eugene Chausovsky. He's a Eurasia Analyst at Stratfor Global Intelligence. Why don't I start here in the studio, and I'll get you to jump in just a second, Eugene. Let's talk about Russian President Vladimir Putin, because he's basically calling the West hypocritical. He points to Kosovo. It unilaterally declared its independence from Serbia in 2008. Says, hey, if it's okay with the West in that case, why shouldn't it be okay this time around?
Well, Mike, it's ironic that Russia rejected Kosovo as a precedent, so I think it's sort of an odd thing for him to bring up right now. Obviously, in Kosovo, a lot of other differences. You had 100,000 people driven out of their homeland. You had up to 10,000 people dead. Very, very different situation. I think if you want to look at parallels, good parallels to look at are closer to home in South Ossetia, in Abkhazia, in Georgia, and Transnistria in Moldova. The Russian government, Putin, has done this sort of thing a couple times before, and based on those models, those examples, I think we kind of know what to expect.
Eugene, let me get your thoughts. Is there a double standard here?
Well, I think that the main point that Russia is trying to send here is that while Kosovo, Russia was very weak during that time period, now Russia is in a much stronger position. So whether there's a direct parallel there or not, I think that's the message that they really wanted to send, is now Russia is the one that's strong here.
And what about the U.S.-EU sanctions? Do you see this having much of an impact in driving this in one way or the other?
I don't think it's going to change any behavior. They're pretty targeted sanctions. You already have some people kind of wearing those as a badge of honor, saying we're proud to be singled out by sanctions like this inside of Russia. They're sort of predictable. I mean, I think that's the normal thing you try to do from the beginning. But if you really want to have an effect on the economy, you've got to have a much bigger set of sanctions that are really targeting the larger economy.
So it's weak.
I'm not sure how much effect they'll have, but I think they're part of an incremental, graduated set of sanctions that President Obama has indicated at least are the beginning of some other options that they might roll out down the road.
Eugene, does this have much influence in moving the ball down the field, so to speak?
I don't think this is going to really impact Russia's behavior at this point, possibly if the sanctions become more powerful and more painful for Russia. But I think at this point, Russia has made it clear that it's not going to influence its decision-making.
There seems to be this ratcheting up of tensions between Russia and the West. And today, Romania's president accused Putin of creating a series of conflicts around the Black Sea with a goal of rebuilding the former Soviet Union. Do you think that's the case?
Well, Mike, I do think it's important to look at kind of the multi-layer situation we have here. We have the referendum going on in Crimea. We have the broader question of Ukraine, which is a deeply divided country that fought on both sides of World War II. There's nothing going to change that historical fact. That's got to be dealt with, and whatever it becomes. You also have Russia and Putin's interest in rebuilding Russian influence. There's no question that's been an ambition of his. He's been pretty naked, pretty open about discussing that. And force movements along the eastern border of Ukraine indicate there are some larger issues at play. Certainly not only Romania, but other countries like Poland and the Baltic countries have also expressed similar concerns.
Eugene, do you put much credence in his comments?
Well, I think it does show that Ukraine is not the only country that's in play here, although clearly it's the most important one right now. There's a number of different countries that are being contested between Russia and between the West. Moldova is one of them. Georgia is also in the neighborhood. So I think there is a certain credence to the comments.
Well, let me piggyback off that, because I saw your Forbes piece, and you said that would be a more worrying competition between the West and Russia. Why do you think that?
Well, because basically it would take the conflict to a different level. Right now, it's a conflict over one country. It seems to be rather localized. But if this spreads to the entire region, and if countries like Central Europe, Poland, and the Baltic states become involved, then the conflict could become much more dramatic.
And let me get your thoughts on that. A regional tug of war, do you see that really developing? Because that really could be, down the road, a piece what this could lead to, in a sense.
Well, Mike, that's what I think everybody wanted to avoid. Everybody keeps saying we don't want to go back to a Cold War. There's no reason to go back to a Cold War. Truly, there isn't. If you look at the West, you look at the European Union, you look at the U.S., not a lot of interest, really, in playing this sort of a game. Putin looks at it very, very differently. However, to the extent Putin is going to do things that are going to destabilize the collective security organization in Europe, the NATO alliance, I think you're going to force NATO to do something. You can't undermine the credibility of deterrence. You can't undermine the credibility of the Article 5 guarantees.
So is it a game of chicken that's going on right now?
I think it's very difficult to know what's going on inside of President Putin's head. I think the important thing to look at are the facts. And the facts are, you have, for example, Ambassador of Lithuania last weekend questioning Article 5 as a romantic idea. I think to the extent that you have members of the NATO coalition that are concerned about their viability and their exposure to Russian aggression, either direct or indirect, or cyber attacks or other things designed to destabilize their countries and economies, that's a big problem. And that's not something I think the U.S. and Europe are going to be able to stand by and watch.
Eugene, I'm going to throw the last question in your direction, because I think it was an interesting piece that you wrote in Forbes about this trip you took to Estonia with these 3 mechanics from Ukraine. And it kind of really sets the table in terms of the different kind of belief systems in that country, which Job also alluded to just a moment ago. Can you recount that story for us?
Yeah, absolutely. It's no secret that Ukraine is a very divided country even before this crisis broke out. And when I had the chance to travel in Ukraine, I was in Crimea and I was traveling to Kiev, and this is where I had a chance to sort of get different perspectives on the crisis. Obviously, many people in Kiev and the west of Ukraine were very supportive of the protests and are looking east, I should say, are looking towards Europe, whereas people in Crimea and in eastern Ukraine, for the most part, don't want to go that direction. And that's kind of where we see the crisis really intensifying now in that context.
All right, gentlemen, we've run out of time, but thank you both for your observations. Certainly appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here.